Welcome to this explainer. Today, we're looking at one of the absolutely most fascinating intersections of modern tech and human health. We're talking about how the pharmaceutical industry manages the explosive growth of artificial intelligence. It's a complex web of global rules, but we're going to break it all down for you. Okay, let's dive into this. So, I want you to ask yourself a serious question. Would you trust an AI with your medication? In our everyday lives, we're pretty used to AI being this mysterious black box. You feed data in and poof, an answer magically comes out. But when we're talking about life-saving drugs, yeah, a black box is completely unacceptable. The stakes for patient safety are just way too high. Regulators demand what we might call a glass box, a system that is perfectly transparent, heavily documented, and rigorously controlled. To make sense of this intimidating web of rules, we're going to break it down into 6 logical pieces. First, the high stakes, then global rulemakers, validation, trusting the data, managing risks, and finally, the human in the loop.
Let's kick things off with Section 1, the high stakes of AI.
Look, in most businesses, AI is just a handy efficiency tool. But in pharma, patient safety and data integrity are literally on the line. Operating in a highly regulated environment means that every single time AI touches a process, it has to be absolutely foolproof. To really grasp how deep this goes, we have to decode a foundational acronym in the pharma world, GXP. That stands for Good Practice Regulations. And if AI is used anywhere in the GXP lifecycle, it has to be rigorously validated. Take the GLP phase, or Good Laboratory Practice. If you've got an AI predicting toxicity during preclinical research, it must be validated. Move over to clinical trials, GCP. And an AI helping recruit patients has to be totally reliable and auditable. When we get to actually making the drugs under good manufacturing practice, any AI doing quality inspections needs proven performance, and it doesn't even stop there. After the drug hits the market in the GVP phase, AI detecting adverse events still requires strict human oversight. It is a continuous, unbreakable chain of validation.
Moving on to Section 2, global rulemakers and regulators. So, who actually enforces all these high stakes? Well, the rules change depending on where you are in the world, and companies have to juggle all of them simultaneously. Now, what's really interesting about this is the contrasting approach between 2 major regulatory heavyweights. Take the US FDA, for example. They don't actually have a single standalone AI regulation for pharma just yet. Instead, they expect AI systems to neatly integrate into existing regulations, like 21 CFR Part 11 for electronic records. But then look over at Europe. The European Medicines Agency, teaming up with the new EU AI Act, explicitly calls out healthcare AI systems and classifies them as high risk. And that high-risk classification triggers a whole host of strict transparency, documentation, and continuous monitoring mandates. But hey, it doesn't stop at just drug regulations. Because AI fundamentally runs on data, and in pharma, we are talking about highly sensitive patient data, strict data privacy laws carry massive weight across the globe. Think about the GDPR in Europe, HIPAA in the US, and India's Digital Personal Data Protection Act of 2023. These are definitely not just gentle suggestions. Non-compliance with these global privacy laws carries massive financial and clinical stakes. Which brings us to Section 3, proving it works, validation. So how do you actually prove an algorithm is safe? You can't exactly just walk up to regulators and claim your AI is super smart. You have to validate it. Think of it like a grueling, multi-stage job interview, but for an algorithm. Before a pharma company can even think about deploying an AI model in a regulated environment, they have to thoroughly document and test it for some very specific factors. The model has to prove its accuracy and precision, absolutely. It also has to demonstrate robustness and reproducibility, meaning it doesn't just work once, it works reliably over and over again. They have to rigorously test it for bias to guarantee fair outcomes, prove its clinical relevance, and super importantly, ensure explainability. And here is the real kicker. Every single piece of this validation documentation has to be retained so it's ready to go for regulatory inspections. To actually pull this off, the industry relies on a framework called Computer System Validation, or CSV. And this brilliantly illustrates how you take what is honestly a wildly technical software engineering process and simplify it into structured, undeniable proof. It kicks off with Step 1, clearly defining the user requirement specification. Basically, what does it need to do? Then it moves right into Step 2, installation and operational qualification. This is where you prove the software was actually installed correctly and functions exactly as designed. And finally, we hit Step 3, performance qualification, which proves the system performs exactly as intended out there in the real-world environment. Next up is Section 4, trusting the data,
and the ALCOA Plus principles.
Okay, so once we actually have a validated system, how do we guarantee the data feeding into the AI and the records spitting out of it are actually trustworthy? The answer lies in ALCOA Plus. Regulators absolutely expect AI-generated records to satisfy these core principles. Imagine it like a flawless forensic accounting audit, but specifically for medical data. Let's decode this acronym real quick. The data must be attributable, meaning we know exactly who or what system created it. It must be legible, so we can actually understand it. It has to be contemporaneous, which is just a fancy way of saying it was recorded at the exact time the work was done. It must be original, and of course, it has to be accurate. Sticking to ALCOA Plus ensures that every single decision supported by AI can be fully trusted and thoroughly audited by regulators.
Let's jump to Section 5, Managing Risks and Threats.
You know, getting an AI approved and validated is really only half the battle. Once it's out there facing the real world, AI runs into a whole host of ongoing threats, and maintaining operational safety is a monumental task. Companies have to constantly be on the lookout for model and data drift. That's what happens when an AI's accuracy degrades over time because the real-world data has shifted away from its original training data. And if they're using generative AI, they have to watch out for hallucinations, which is when the AI confidently invents totally incorrect information. Not exactly what you want in medicine. They also have to constantly check for new biases, incorrect predictions, and the very real danger of over-automation. And here's the bottom line. Risk assessments must be fully updated anytime the model or the way the model is used changes.
And while we're on the topic of real-world threats, we absolutely have to talk about cybersecurity. Defending that glass box against cyber threats is a total non-negotiable. Regulators expect strict security controls to be deeply, fundamentally integrated. We're talking strict access controls, heavy-duty encryption, rigorous identity and authentication checks, flawless audit logging, and ironclad incident response plans. Because honestly, if the AI isn't secure, the entire drug development process isn't secure.
Finally, we arrive at Section 6, the human in the loop.
So despite this huge transparent framework, all the validation and mountains of documentation, the whole system fundamentally relies on one thing: human beings. Regulators are incredibly clear on this point. Critical decisions that affect patients absolutely cannot be made solely by an AI. Period. Qualified personnel must be there to review and approve important AI-assisted outputs. Regulators demand that human users fully understand the model's limitations. Humans must always retain the power to challenge, question, or just entirely override the AI's recommendations when necessary.
So the crucial point is this: whether we're talking about early drug discovery, complex clinical trials, or mass manufacturing, AI must be validated, documented, traceable, and subject to ongoing human oversight, rather than treated as a magical black box. AI in pharma isn't some autonomous robot acting on its own accord. It's a highly regulated, tightly controlled, collaborative tool. I'll leave you to ponder this as we wrap up our explainer. We've seen just how strict the glass box is today. But as AI inevitably grows even more advanced and capable, how will the delicate balance between necessary human oversight and the massive potential of algorithm autonomy evolve in medicine? It's a fascinating question and one that regulators and scientists are going to be wrestling with for decades to come. Thank you so much for joining me on this explainer.